Welcome to the Animal Training Fundamentals Podcast, where we have fun with practical application and we get mental with the science of behavior. Put them both together and you get results, solutions for your behavior problems, and the tools you need to achieve your training goals. I'm your host, Barbara Heidenreich. Let's talk training. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Animal Training Fundamentals Podcast with me, your host, Barbara Heidenreich. I know it's been a little while, but it's because I've been on the road attending conferences. I've actually been to 3 conferences, I think, since the last time I did a podcast. 2 of them in Europe and 1 here in the United States. And that is the inspiration behind today's podcast. Because you know what? Attending a conference, it's a pretty big deal. There is a lot to be gained from attending conferences, and I thought we would discuss some of the key features of attending a conference, some of the key strategies, behaviors, things that I think are really important that I've learned over the years of attending so many conferences. So let's talk about some of those important behaviors that you may want to emit when you are attending a conference. So with this particular podcast, what I thought we'd talk about are some of the things that I've learned over the years by participating in so many different conferences. It really you start to see some patterns of things that happen over the course of the days that you're there. And maybe you learn some tips and tricks that help the event to be more successful for you, depending on what your particular goals are. So I thought I'd share some of those with you today. Now, the first one that I think is really important is to participate. I know that sounds really obvious, but you do notice sometimes that it can be challenging to participate for various reasons. One of them might be that maybe it's your first time there, or maybe you don't know anybody, or maybe you're exhausted, or maybe you're just kind of over it. That sometimes happens as well. But let's talk about participation. So really, when I'm talking about participation, I mean attending the events and socializing and networking. And some of those events might include lectures, social events such as icebreakers. There might be events that are off-site, like going to a facility to visit the facility. There might be a banquet. There might be a workshop. There might be committee meetings that you're allowed to participate in so you can see what the organization is up to. And sometimes what you'll notice is that people skip those things for various reasons. Maybe they think it doesn't pertain to them, or maybe they're not so interested in what the topics might be. Sometimes, of course, there's concurrent things, or maybe there's a language barrier and there's no translation, and those are understandable. I certainly understand those things. But what I often find is I learn something even when I don't think the topic is relevant to my particular specific interests. Like at this recent conference, the Zoological Association of America, there were a lot of presentations that were not necessarily related to animal training specifically, because this particular conference is really broad in its reach, because many of the people that attend are interested in things that have to do with operations, or maybe sales, or maybe safety. There's lots of different interest areas. So there were other presentations that I listened to that I was like, ooh, there's some really helpful information that's going to help me. Like the keynote really talked about important information about propaganda and persuasive tactics that are used to manipulate behavior. He had some really interesting statistics about fundraising. So really important information that I found interesting. And then there were other meetings, like there was meetings that had to do with operations that the organization was working on, like the organization shared their strategic plan. And you may think, oh, that's boring. I don't really need to hear that. But it actually really impacts everybody and what's happening in our industry. And so I found that really important and fascinating. And then there were presentations about conservation, of course, which I hope all of us that work with animals are really interested in hearing that. There were quite a few really good conservation presentations. And unfortunately, I didn't get to see them all due to competing presentations, this particular conference does do concurrent sessions so that there's something going on for everybody and all their different interests. I went to the one by Dr. Didone, and that's also a project that Save Giraffes Now is involved with. So that one was interesting to me. And Lynn Lee Schmidt from Tanganyika really knocked it out of the park, in my opinion, with some eye-opening information on measuring behaviors of employees to improve outcomes for their park. So I thought that was really awesome. I, of course, shared my presentation on how we can use behaviors that are trained to fluency so that those behaviors work together, kind of like a team, to generate new behaviors. And of course, if you are a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com, that course will be recorded hopefully in the next few weeks, and that will be in our program very soon. So those are just a glimpse. And of course, there were other conferences that I've attended recently, like IAZA, and there was a wonderful congress in Poland. And although I wasn't able to sit in on all the presentations at both of those conferences, some because of language barriers, some because there were just so many to choose from, I definitely learned things from all sorts of presenters at those conferences. I really loved the presentations by Dr. Mads Bertelsen from Copenhagen Zoo. He is a specialist. Well, he does all sorts of veterinary medicine, but he really knows his information about giraffes. And boy, did I learn a lot about giraffe medicine. And even though some of the stuff was over my head, there were definitely parts of it that were relevant to animal training that I definitely grabbed onto. And I'm like, oh, that's going to help me with my clients in our animal training. So, you just never know what you're going to pick up. So, boy, it's so worthwhile. It's so worthwhile when we have these opportunities to listen to these subject matter experts in different disciplines from what we are typically surrounding ourselves with. So I love these opportunities when they come up. Now, there may be other activities that are going on that are not so much of a lecture, like at the recent ZAA meeting, Zoological Association of America. There were also committee meetings, and many of these committee meetings were open for the members to sit in and listen on those meetings. And I'll tell you, I went to as many of those as I could attend because it's really interesting to learn more about the organization and what these committees are accomplishing and what they're doing and how they're working together. And so you really learn more about the industry of which you are a part. And so I really appreciated those opportunities. And I think sometimes we don't think that we should be in those meetings, or that it's appropriate for us to be there, or what we could contribute. But I think those are the moments where you discover how you can become more involved in your industry. And again, it's a great opportunity for you to get to know more people especially if you're new to the industry and you're looking for opportunities for you to get to know people and become more involved. So attending those committee meetings, especially if they're open meetings, they'll usually say if they're closed, if they're not allowing people to come sit in on that particular meeting. Another thing you don't want to miss is the extracurricular activities. So things like the icebreaker or the banquet, or if there's a visit to a facility, or sometimes conferences offer workshop activities, things like that. These things may seem like, well, it's extra. I'm going to have to spend a little money. Maybe I don't want to do that. But here's why I think these are so valuable. This is really where you get the time to network with other participants. Usually when we're sitting in on a lecture or a meeting, you're not going to have that kind of time to have a discussion with somebody and find out more about them, and maybe what kind of animals they're working with, what kind of challenges they're facing, what you may have in common with them. So I will tell you, some of the best experiences I have at conferences are, when we're riding the bus to the facility. I have met so many quote, new friends sitting on the bus, having a discussion, or are caught up with, an old colleague while sitting on the bus, going to a facility. And then on this particular trip, I had a great time having dinner with what I'd like to call new friends. We happened to be attending a little extracurricular activity just around dinner time, and we were just engaged in a really great conversation. And so we all decided to go out to dinner together, and we just had a really great time. And I just kind of feel like that kind of moment is one that I'm always going to remember and feel like, that was a great moment to get together, get to know some new colleagues, and hopefully that will continue to grow from there. So don't miss out on those opportunities. You may feel a little tired, and you may be like, I don't think I want to go do that. I just, it was a long day of travel. We all feel that way. Trust me. I've been there many times. But if you can take a little break and then get your energy together, and even if you just attend for a short period of time, often those are the moments where you have some of the best experiences. And I also wanted to mention, when you do those extracurricular activities like walking around the zoo, that's another one of my favorite times where you get to stroll and spend some time and chat with people and really get to know some of the folks that you've been spending the week with. So again, attending those activities that are a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more laid back, can be a really important time to get to know your colleagues and network. We're going to take a little break to give you your first secret word, and the secret word is networking. Secret words are important to remember and submit to show you have listened to this podcast for your professional development. All right, back to the program. Another really important reason to visit the facility is that you're also going to learn a lot. You may get to see an animal training demonstration. You may get a behind-the-scene tour. You may get to chat with some of the staff members that are working there and ask some specific questions. You may get to look at maybe the facility design, ask them what they like, what they don't like about that design. And all those little bits of information are going to help you with whatever you're working on. So again, don't skip the trip if you can help it. And I know those are the kinds of things that we're like, oh gosh, can I add that on to my packet of expenses? But I always find that it's really worth it. Even if you've been there before, it's always worth coming back and seeing what they've changed, what's been different since you were there last time. And again, because you're also going to be there with a different group of people that may have a different perspective and may give you some additional insights based on what they're experiencing at their own facilities. So again, there's lots of reasons to make sure you participate in the field trips. If you're new to networking, it can feel a little scary to reach out and say hello to a stranger. But remember, if you're just hanging out with those people that you already know and your best buddies, you're really missing out on wonderful opportunities to get to know colleagues. And you're also missing out on new perspectives and new ideas that can benefit your work. One of, I think, the current challenges in our industry is we're kind of seeing repetition of the same narratives of information. And if we want to break free, we really need to be open to seeing new ideas. So ways that you can kind of move away from just hanging out with your same group is you can practice opening lines to meet new people. Get fluent in this behavior before you attend the conference. Maybe have a standard line, for how to invite yourself to the table, so to speak, at a lunch break and introduce yourself. Learn how to ask questions to get people talking to generate a conversation. Maybe you can thank somebody who gave a presentation that you really liked, and or maybe even thank a board of director, or maybe a committee member who's doing some work, or maybe somebody that you're following on social media who's attending the conference that's doing something that you really like. There's lots of ways to engage in conversation so that you can start opening up your circle of people that are in your network. I'd also like to mention it's worthwhile spending time talking to the vendors. You never know what great connection you'll make in the exhibit hall that's going to last throughout your entire career. And a lot of the vendors that participate in the kinds of conferences that animal trainers are involved with are small business people themselves, and so they can relate to what we're going through. A lot of times they'll do custom things for us. They'll work closely with you to really help see your needs, and they're also talking to other people in our industry. So there's a lot of information sharing that's going on there. So the people in the vendor hall are really important people to network with as well. Here's a tip for your networking. Even though things have gone digital and a lot of conferences have apps with contact information, I still recommend you bring a business card if you have them. And here's why. That little paper card is a good stimulus for that contact that you've made when they get back to their home base. It's going to help be a little reminder that they discussed something with you and that perhaps they need to follow up with you. And even with that, you still may want to follow up with that person when you get home. So one of the things that I also recommend is that you take some notes. If you've had a conversation with somebody and you said, hey, we're going to do this after the conference, make a note of it. Maybe you make it on your phone, or maybe you send yourself an email, or you put a reminder in your calendar to follow up. Because what tends to happen is, like I said, there's a lot of stimuli coming at you at once, and it's really hard to keep track of everything that you said you were going to do after you connected with people there. And so it's a great idea to, if you said, hey, I'll send you this article, send it right away, or put a note in your phone, or send yourself an email so that you follow up with those folks, because it's very easy for things to fall through the cracks. One thing I would say is not a good practice is when you if you meet up with somebody at the conference and you say, hey, let's catch up later at the conference, there's a good chance it won't happen. So whatever you need to say it in that moment, or you definitely need to actually schedule a time and place to meet, or the odds are you will not see that person again at the conference, especially if it's a very big conference. It's unlikely that you will cross paths again unless you actually actively plan to. So just a few tips for your networking. And again, after the conference, follow up on everything in your notes as soon as possible while it's still fresh in your mind. Send those emails from the airport, write up those notes and proposals and those ideas that you generated from all those discussions. Put deadlines in your calendar to follow up with people. They really will easily be forgotten as the days and the months go by, unfortunately. But if you're on top of it, it shouldn't be a problem. All right, we've talked a lot about the benefits and the cool things that you can get out of being at a conference. But I also want to talk about some of the things to do to make sure you're taking care of yourself at the conference, because sometimes conferences are overwhelming too. There could be many stimuli, many events. They're kind of all happening at the same time and coming at you. I know sometimes I get a little overwhelmed by the bright lights of the projectors, especially if the room is kind of dark. There's this contrast there, and that for me can trigger a headache. I also am not a fan when the acoustics of the various rooms don't absorb the sound very well. So sometimes icebreakers and banquets can be in situations where they're really, really noisy. Everybody's talking at once and it's very hard to hear the person that's right next to you. And after a while, that gets really exhausting. So if that's happening to you, you may need to take a little break, right? You may need to get away to a quiet place, and you may just want to make sure you have some awareness of that and step outside if you need to, go someplace where it's a little bit quieter, maybe take a little break, go to your room, take a walk outside. Those are things that are things to be sensitive about if you're not already aware of that. And sometimes there's nice, peaceful parks to visit, depending on where the conference is being hosted. And so those are things that you might want to check out in advance before you even come to the conference. So we talked about taking breaks during the conference, but there's some other things you might want to do to make sure you're doing okay at the conference. There's a lot of times there's free food at the conference and a lot of alcohol opportunities as well. But it's easy to kind of eat too much and drink too much and maybe stay up really late, which if you can handle it, awesome. But sometimes what we can see over the years is that people maybe get a little bit too much drinking and too much unhealthy food and too little sleep. And the next thing you know, they don't really participate in the conference. So you may need to balance that, watch what you're doing. So I tend to bring my own food with me, or I purchase some stuff at the stores so that I kind of try to balance how much I'm eating of the unhealthy stuff that's offered. Or so I only, if it's great food that I want to try, maybe I just try little bits of it, or maybe I save one meal to be sort of the bigger good tasty meal, and then I have lighter snacks with me that I can eat that are not quite so heavy. And then usually the icebreaker is not super late, and people tend not to drink too heavily that first night, and then they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for that first day of talks. If there is a night out on the town, that's usually the one where people tend to get a little bit crazy, and usually the next morning people don't attend everything as well. So if you're somebody that likes to participate in that stuff, just be aware that that's it's easy to get caught up in the fun, and you may not attend the things the next day. But again, it's just about having an awareness and being careful about not going too far in one direction, perhaps that might not be good for your health or your ability to attend things. And again, one of the things that we're seeing now is that more organizations are being pretty invested in having some policies and code of conduct policies that they are posting for their events. So, they want you to have a great time, but they also want you to be sure that you are respectful to your colleagues there. So they do have code of conduct policies that refer to sexual harassment, responsible drinking, and conflicts of interest. So those are the kinds of things that you may want to make sure you review when you are looking at these conferences and registering, so that you are behaving in a way that represents yourself and your company very well when you attend these events. And of course, another really important reason for that is it can have a long-lasting impact on your career when we don't adhere to those policies. Time for your second secret word, and the secret word is participate. All right, let's get back to the program. I think it's still hard to beat the in-person conference for getting inspired and, getting very excited about seeing colleagues and meeting new people and getting to see new facilities. But it is hard to travel sometimes. It's costly and it's time consuming, and you're away from home, and it does have its disadvantages. So fortunately, we do have many more online events than we ever had before, especially since the pandemic. And these are really amazing opportunities to still have continuing education opportunities, sometimes from amazing professionals that we don't normally get access to. So it's really fantastic. And as we know, they can be really convenient. Many people can attend, and they can be really very interactive. They can be at convenient times. Even though people can watch the replay, I personally think it's way more fun when people are there live, and so that they can ask questions of the presenter, they can chat with the other people that are participating, and I hope as time goes on, we just keep improving these online events so that they become maybe a pretty close second to those in-person ones as well. And of course, those of you that are members of animaltrainingfundamentals.com or follow my stuff online, you know that we do offer some online events. We have the Global Online Animal Training Series, GOATS, and we do have a event coming up soon with Annetta Peterson from the Copenhagen Zoo, where she will be talking about a case study with a tiger who showed aggressive responses towards one particular individual and how they transformed that behavior from aggressive to really calm and relax. And actually, he's totally great with this person now. And she took lots of data and information, video clips, and so she's going to share that transformation in our upcoming GOATs. That's going to be November 27th on a Monday. So please do join us for that. You can go to atfgoats.com to sign up for that. And then, of course, we do a live stream called You Be the Behavior Consultant on most Mondays, not every single Monday. It depends on travel schedules. And that's another opportunity where people can be interactive and chat with us and share their experiences. And with the GOATS presentation, people will be able to ask questions and participate in that as well. But then there are other organizations that also offer online events. avianbehavior.org has a conference called Avocet that I think last year was their first annual one, but they are repeating it again next year, or I should say this year was their first one, so they're repeating it again next year. BehaviorExplorer.com is another one that offers both live in-person and online events. So that's another resource. And then the Constructional Approach to Animal Welfare and Training, so that's COUT.com. Sean Will and Masa Nishimuta, they also offer online events, and I believe they're also offering some in-person events too. So there's a lot of really great resources for getting animal training information where we can get people together and chat and discuss things. Actually, COUT does with their membership. They have lots of get-togethers online. So another place where people can gather and chat about training, and so does Avian Behavior. So we've got a lot of places where people can get together and continue this networking and this learning online that has that same kind of vibe that you can get at a conference, even if you can't go to a conference. So I don't want to make it sound like your only opportunity is to spend a lot of money and travel somewhere. It isn't. But I did want to use this opportunity in this particular podcast to talk about how to make the most out of your conference experience, how to keep it pleasant for you, how to really get a great experience out of it, what some of the things that I do that help me really enjoy conferences, and some of the things that I hope will encourage you to attend a conference if you can, if you see it in your future. And if you can't get to one in person, certainly join one of these events online, or all of these events online, because they're all pretty amazing. I will add links to all those resources in the episode show notes. All right, that is it for this particular podcast. I look forward to having you join us for another one in the future, and we'll see you next time. If you liked what you heard today, visit animaltrainingfundamentals.com for more quality content on animal training. You'll find courses, community, and extensive video examples from my consulting work around the world. We'd love to have you join our force-free family.